Flight attendants and pilots of Reddit, what are some things that happen mid-flight that only the crew are aware of? As an air traffic controller, we are constantly swearing and yelling at pilots when we're not on the frequency, and then when we key up we use our nice guy voices. One of my all-time favorites is the captain accidentally broadcasting his passenger briefing, "Welcome aboard, weather in Chicago" and so on frequency, instead of the aircraft PA system, blocking up ground, ramp, tower, etc. For a solid 15 seconds. You automatically become the laughingstock of the airport. A lady who was feeling very ill crapped her pants mid-flight. A very kind FA managed to get her covered in a blanket and into the bathroom with barely anyone noticing, and then gave her a pair of her own pants to wear so she wouldn't be embarrassed. I've got an original one for you all. There is a radio frequency we all are required to monitor. It's called GUARD. It's for emergency use and is designed for maydays and for air traffic control to reach aircraft that may have lost radio contact, or to relay messages from aircraft to other aircraft, etc. Every day this frequency is abused. You will hear hundreds of professional aviators meowing, yelling obscenities at each other, and making fun of one airline or another. Oftentimes what will start it is some poor guy accidentally transmitting his PA announcement to passengers on the GUARD frequency, followed by the very mature outbreaks for about 5-10 minutes. It's the worst on the East Coast. I've seen the meowing mentioned a few times. What's up with that? For real, I'm baffled by this. The scariest moment of my day is when the FA opens the internal bag door, the closet we all throw our overnight bags in, without calling us in the flight deck first. That ding and master caution gets me every time. Airplane be like, oh, it's someone opened a freaking internal door. I know there's probably more to it than that, but it seems like opening an external door would be more of a problem. Those get noises much louder than dings. There's a special frequency called GUARD that all aircraft are supposed to monitor. It's for emergencies, or for when an aircraft ends up on a wrong frequency and the controllers need to get contact with them to change them to the right frequency. It's full of pilots meowing at each other, and people accidentally asking for gate assignments and making other radio calls. My dad's a pilot and has told me about this before. He says sometimes it'll start with some guy yelling "good," followed by some retired colonel in a serious tone saying, "Hey, get off guard." Then there's a long pause, and some guy just says, meow. My dad told me one time he accidentally said his cabin announcement to the GUARD frequency, and some guy replied, "Nice one, United." I want to see them accidentally meow in the cabin speakers, instead of GUARD. Pilot here. We only get paid when the doors are closed and the pushback is commenced. If we're delayed or sitting with the door open, we're just as annoyed as you are. At altitude we're constantly in contact with air traffic control and change to different center frequencies, or control for other than US locations. We're also doing fuel checks to make sure the fuel burn isn't abnormal, dodging weather, and probably bitching about scheduling. Out of curiosity, how often do you talk with dispatch during an average flight? Was actually thinking of becoming one for a while. Dispatch during the flight? Honestly, we really only talk with them if there's weather we need to go around or some other issue. I probably talk to them once or twice a week max. I believe Delta speaks a lot more often with their dispatch to avoid light chop. Sometimes prior to the flight we need to call up and ask about alternates etc, or if weights are significantly different from planned, but that's not too often. Pilots are on their phones or reading the newspaper all the time. Oftentimes they're browsing Reddit. What's up? The plane. Not anymore. Oh. Ex-airline employee here. Often we'd have someone on board with terrible body odor. You can set the temperature in one end of the cabin hotter and it localized the smell to one part of the plane. If you see coffee filter bags hanging anywhere, it's because someone smells like openness somewhere on the plane. FARs often talk about the hot guy in 23B or whatever seat he's in. Pilots freak around a lot up front. They'll take pictures, post on FB, watch movies. Automation has taken over a lot of the work on long flights. Pilot here. Late to the party as usual. But sometimes the passengers may be having a nice quiet flight in the back while the pilots are up front dodging thunderstorms and yelling their heads off. We will not only transport dead bodies, but also live transplants, like hearts and lungs. I particularly like the live transplants, because we get to cut to the front of the line for takeoff and we get all the shortcuts to our destination. Tip for those who get motion sickness: try not to move your head around. Pilots move their eyes, instead of their heads, to look at the instruments in the flight deck. Also try to sit in a seat over the wing. This area of the plane doesn't rotate as much during climbs and descents. Flight attendants can't do pilots' job, but pilots can't do flight attendants' jobs for sure. We aren't hired for our people skills. Don't take off your shoes to go to the bathroom. People pee on the floor all the time. It amazes me when I see people walk into an airplane bathroom without their shoes on. It amazes me when people take off their shoes and sock and put their legs up on the seat in front. Don't forget the armrests in front. I've had flights before with shoeless feet sitting next to my elbow. Not nice. We were on the taxiway holding short of the runway for like 5 minutes when the pilot tells us it's going to be about 10 minutes until we take off because of wind. I, having had 2 beers and a Diet Coke, decide this is my opportune moment to pee. Flight attendant says I should be fine. Midstream, I feel the aircraft lurch forward onto the runway. Long story short, took off in the bathroom. How often does that happen? That's the first time I've heard of a takeoff with someone in the bathroom. We land with people in the bathroom somewhat often. I wouldn't recommend it though. Sometimes the blue juice can escape. This started off with us blissfully unaware, ended with mild pant-itting. I was flying to France in one of those planes with the TV screen up front to show the flight path and where you currently are. I was just about to fall asleep when the captain asked over the PA if there was a doctor on board and if they could go to seat. I knew this was bad. The flight path changed to Canada and we had to make an emergency landing. We were stuck there for 2 hours. When we finally got to France, his entire row was quarantined off. I have no idea what the frick happened. I'm an airline pilot. When things happen like diversions and such, I always like to be blunt with passengers and keep them in the loop. But with a medical situation, I would be very hesitant to divulge details out of respect for the person involved. An instructor told me that he and his training buddy both fell asleep for about 45 minutes at the same time, while gaining hours for licensing. The plane was in complete autopilot mode. Clear skies, zero turbulence. They both swore if they ever flew again they would hand off sleep like handing off the controls. I wish I had someone to hand me off in my sleep. I feel like getting handed off would wake you up. But I suppose if they finish, you'll get back to sleep pretty quickly. My uncle was a pilot. He says that most people don't understand how much of the airplane is run by computers. The pilots are necessary, but a lot of the elements of flying are automated nowadays. There's a joke about the Airbus A380 that goes, the A380 comes with a pilot and a dog. The pilot is there to feed the dog. The dog is there to bark at the pilot if he tries to touch anything. That's so weird. My dad was a commercial pilot and he said the opposite. You might use a computer to help you do your job at work, but does it replace you? No, it just assists you do your job better. Boeing vs Airbus smiley face. Pilot is sleeping and co-pilot is flying and there are dead bodies in the cargo. Source: my mum, who is a former flight attendant. Pilot here. Most of the time the passengers are not given the full answer on why a flight is delayed or cancelled. Airlines will typically blame cancellations on unrelated events, weather, instead of mechanical issues, so they don't have to pay for hotel rooms, meals, etc. Also, chemtrails are not real. For those of you who believe they are real, give your head a shake. One split second of instinct combined with piloting skill decides if you land on the runway or on the side of it. Most of the runways are 45 meters wide, and on a gusty summer afternoon or during thunderstorms I take God's name more than Pope himself. A smooth landing is not necessarily a good landing. One can make a smooth landing and it will feel good for passengers, but it could be a risky landing if the pilot decides to use extra runway. Never shout at your pilot for a bad landing unless he crash lands. And if he crash lands and you can shout at him, understand that you are alive because of him. FA here. At mid-flight I noticed a strange thing with one of the slides was not armed properly and had an issue with it. However, we landed safely and nobody of the packs knew nothing. A former teacher told us a story that fits the question. Every year he would make trips to Europe that were for an educational experience, or related to the subject he taught in one way or another. In reality, it was just an amazing way to spend 2 weeks in Europe. One year he took a student's brother with, since he needed an extra person to have the minimum amount of required students. After the 10-hour flight, the flight attendant walks up to him and asks if said brother was a part of his group. He says yes. Apparently, on the flight he stopped the flight attendant and asked her to have sex with him in the bathroom. She denied, but he continued to ask her several more times through the flight. It reached a point to where she no longer felt anywhere near comfortable. She asked my teacher if she could notify the authorities and have him sent back to the States. And here, while she is helping you on the ground, she is essentially doing you a favor. I don't understand how this is legal, or how it's justified. It's not like you're not working before the plane pulls back from the gate.